When we consider the geography of our planet, we do so from what we have learned from the past 2,000 or 3,000 years. We seldom consider this has changed much in millennia, and we get bogged down with the idea that everything today has existed the way it is for thousands of years. But it couldn't have been the case. Why? Well, because a map exists that clearly shows parts of the world in a different perspective hundreds of years before we even discovered the landmass of these locations. Wait till you hear this. In 1929, a group of historians found an amazing map drawn on a gazelle skin. Research showed that it was a genuine document drawn in 1513 by Piri Reis, a famous admiral of the Turkish fleet in the 16th century. His passion was cartography. His high rank with the Turkish Navy allowed him to have a privileged access to the Imperial Library of Constantinople. The Turkish admiral admits in a series of notes on the map that he compiled and copied the data from a large number of source maps, some of which dated back to the 4th century BC or earlier, and or thought to have been documents saved from the legendary Library of Alexandria. Potentially one of the most significant finds of modern time, as it is clearly dated 1513 AD and shows both the coastlines of the American and the Antarctic coastline, which is thought to have been frozen for at least 6,000 years. This map alters all previous conceptions of our prehistoric ancestors' abilities. The Piri Reis Map is one of several portolanos which appears to have a geometric basis of unknown provenance. It has several interesting features which deserves investigation. The legend on the map itself revealed that it was a section of a world map composed from more than 20 source maps drawn in the time of Alexander the Great. A connection existed between this map and several other ancient portolanos, some of which include the outline of the Antarctic continent. These facts led to suggestions of the existence of knowledge from a time before the Greeks and placed a question mark over the origin and age of civilization, and indeed if this information belonged to a lost civilization like the Atlanteans. The Piri Reis Map shows the western coast of Africa, the eastern coast of South America, and the northern coast of Antarctica. The northern coastline of Antarctica is perfectly detailed. The most puzzling part, however, is not so much how Piri Reis managed to draw such an accurate map of the Antarctic region 300 years before it was discovered, but that the map shows the coastline free from ice. Geological evidence confirms that the last date Antarctica could have been charted in an ice-free state is 4000 BC. The official science has been saying all along that the ice cap which covers the Antarctic is million years old. The Reis map shows that the northern part of the continent has been mapped before the ice did cover it. That should suggest it has been mapped millions years ago, but that's impossible since our civilization did not exist in that time, right? The question is, who mapped the Queen Maud land of Antarctica 6,000 years ago? Which unknown civilization had the technology or the need to do that? In July 1960, a United States Air Force commander made the following statement regarding an evaluation of the map. Your request of evaluation of certain unusual features of the Piri Reis Map of 1513 by this organization has been reviewed. The claim that the lower part of the map portrays the Prince Martha coast of Queen Maud Land, Antarctic, and the Palmer Peninsula is reasonable. We find that this is the most logical and in all probability the correct interpretation of the map. The geographical detail shown in the lower part of the map agrees very remarkably with the results of the seismic profile made across the top of the ice cap by the Swedish-British Antarctic Expedition of 1949. This indicates the coastline had been mapped before it was covered by the ice cap. The ice cap in this region is now about a mile thick. We have no idea how the data of this map can be reconciled with the supposed state of geographical knowledge in 1513. Astronomers have concluded that it takes a century for the Tropic of Cancer to drift 40 seconds of latitude. This gives us a formula for our calculations and enables us to bullseye the date when the original map makers were at work. Cyane is 38 minutes and 30 seconds from today's Tropic of Cancer. This is 2,280 plus the 30 seconds, gives us a total of 2,310 seconds difference. We then divide these seconds by 40 to find the Cyane was last on the Tropic of Cancer some 57.75 centuries ago. By calculating the difference in distance from the latitude of today's Tropic of Cancer to that of Cyane, we discover the answer. About 5.775 years ago, that is circa 3,760 BC, it is noteworthy that the Jewish calendar begins on this date. The projection of the Piri Reis points like an arrow at a pivotal turning point in human history. Archaeology teaches that Egyptian civilization dawned circa 3,800 BC. Can it really be mere coincidence that the Piri Reis Map looks to date from the dawn of Egyptian civilization? Far more likely that the sophisticated source maps used by Piri Reis are remnants passed on by the survivors of a lost Ice Age civilization, a seafaring civilization that had mapped the world long before the emergence of the dynastic Egyptians. Plenty of mystery surrounds this map. There's no doubt it was created using maps from a lost ancient civilization and probably from documents and texts recovered from the Library of Alexandria. This is yet but another piece of the puzzle with obvious information looking us right in the face, yet we are still trying to explain it away using the flawed education process we have been brainwashed with. What do you guys think of this anyway? Comments below, and as always, thank you for watching.
And here we're on the island of Suriqui in Bolivia, on Lake Titicaca, looking at a traditional method of boat design. It's one of the few places on Lake Titicaca where these boats are still built, these reed boats with high curving prows. And according to local tradition, the design of these boats was brought to the Andes by the gods, by the Viracochas, as they were called, gods who were remembered as being tall and pale-skinned and bearded, who'd come from across the sea to South America in a time of turmoil and darkness after a great catastrophe, and who had brought with them this kind of boat design and many, many other skills, advanced skills of civilization. I'd like to compare this high-prowed boat with this design from ancient Egypt, the so-called solar boat of Khufu, which was found buried beside the Great Pyramid of Egypt off the southern face. It's much bigger than the boats on the Andes, but the design is eerily similar. And this design has been studied by marine experts, and what they've concluded is rather interesting. They conclude that although the materials used both in the Egyptian boats and in the Andean boats are not suitable for sailing on the open seas, the design that is incorporated in these boats could only have been evolved by a people with a long and solid tradition of oceanic navigation, people who needed boats that could cut through high waves and breakers. And the suggestion is, could this design be a very ancient legacy that was passed down and received both by the Egyptians and by the peoples of the Andes and expressed in the kind of boats that they made? In both areas, such boats are associated with the gods. The ancient Egyptians called their gods the Niteru, and they said that they had come from a land far away to the south, a land called Ta-Niteru, across vast expanses of ocean. So whoever they may have been, these gods, above all else, were navigators and seafarers. And navigators and seafarers need maps if they're going to sail around the earth. Now this map is a modern map, and I picked it up at the Library of Congress in the United States. It's an azimuthal equidistant projection centered near Cairo. And in common with all modern maps, it incorporates a number of advanced features. It incorporates highly accurate longitudes, and particularly relative longitudes. And it incorporates an advanced map projection. It isn't easy to represent a spherical object, the Earth, on a flat piece of paper, and to do so with a considerable degree of accuracy. And this is a problem that cartography has had to overcome. So we find good map projections which require advanced mathematics and good relative longitudes. Interestingly enough, there's a category of ancient map which also shows these modern features and which doesn't fit with the received view of the development of human history. One of the most famous of these maps is the Piri Reis Map. And I'm showing it here because I want to compare the projection of this map with the projection here centered on Cairo. Notice the west coast of Africa and the east coast of South America, and coming down here to the Antarctic Peninsula, tonguing up towards the south of South America. It's that precise projection that we find on this 1513 map. Again, there's the west coast of Africa, the east coast of South America. And coming down here, we find a representation of the northern Antarctic Peninsula. In 1513, when Piri Reis drew the map, Antarctica had not been discovered. In fact, it wasn't discovered until 1818 by our civilization. So there immediately is one anomaly on this map. And another anomaly is the mathematics used in the map projection. And a third anomaly is that it incorporates highly accurate relative longitudes. To do longitudes accurately on maps requires a chronometer, a marine chronometer that will keep accurate time at sea. And again, this was something that our civilization couldn't do until the late 18th century. So this map, fragmentary though it is, appears to incorporate many features that are not supposed to have been known about in 1513. Piri Reis explains why in these texts that he wrote on the map. He was a Turkish admiral, and he wrote these texts on the map. And what they say is that the map is not his own work. It's a work of synthesis. It's based on more than 20 earlier source maps, that he put all these maps together and derived his own map from these. And unfortunately, the source maps that Piri Reis used have not survived. Is it possible that the advanced features of this map originate in those lost source maps, which Piri Reis told us went back in some cases to before the time of Christ and had come from the long-lost library of Alexandria in Egypt? Another strange thing about the appearance of Antarctica on this map, it's been studied by US Air Force cartographers, and their view is that what we're actually seeing there is the subglacial topography of Antarctica. Antarctica as it looks underneath the ice that now covers it. And this raises the question, how long has Antarctica been covered with the 2-mile thick ice cap that we now presently see on it? Such questions would be irrelevant if there were no other maps in this category. If the Piri Reis map stood alone, the most sensible thing to do would be to dismiss it as a coincidence. But it doesn't stand alone. There's hundreds of other maps that incorporate this same information at a time when our civilization had not yet acquired that information. This is the Mercator map. Mercator is rather famous for his Mercator projection that still dominates most atlases today. It's a 16th century map, and it shows Antarctica 300 years before Antarctica was discovered. And again, it's based on earlier source maps, and again, it incorporates accurate relative longitudes. So also the Orontius Phineas map that we're looking at here, another 16th century map. Mercator includes it in one of his atlases. And here we see Antarctica looking a little bit different, with mountains clearly visible along the coast and rivers running down from those mountains in places where great glaciers are known to run today. It looks on this map as though Antarctica is partially deglaciated. The center of the continent appears to be featureless and ice-covered, but the coast is showing these unglaciated features. What might that mean? This is a map by Philippe Bouache, an 18th century geographer, still a good 100 years before the discovery of Antarctica. And it shows the continent as a kind of archipelago, two major land masses divided by a clear waterway running between them. I wonder where he got that idea from. There's a redrawing of the Mercator map and the Orontius Phineus map and the Buash map. And here to the right, based on seismic surveys conducted in International Geophysical Year in 1958, is a view of what Antarctica actually looks like underneath all that ice that now covers it. We're looking at the subglacial landscape of Antarctica here. And while I wouldn't claim for a moment that the Buash map is a perfectly accurate representation of the subglacial topography of Antarctica, I think it's much too close to the reality to be dismissed entirely. I think that much more research needs to be done into these anomalous early maps and into the source maps that they rely upon for their information, because we just may be looking at the faint fingerprints of a lost civilization, of a navigating, seafaring civilization that explored and mapped the entire globe long before what we call history began.